everybody, it's me, Sugar, and I'm here with my husband, Jeff.
Hello.
And we were going to talk to you about Fall 2019 in the lineup. It's a little thicker this time than other seasons.
Thick.
She's a thick one.
2 C's thick.
Oh, wow. Anywho, let's get moseying. We got a bunch to cover. So, first one, Africa Salaryman. You know, it's kind of broke my heart that we dropped it in a way. And I say that because, and I know Jeff feels the same way I do because we spoke about it, it was genuinely funny.
The lion was very funny. My main problem, beyond obviously how it looked, is the toucan for me was like...
huge douche.
He was grating. Like, there's room in an anime like this for a character, you know, that's a little grating, a little annoying. Mm-hmm. I mean, the very first thing that comes to mind is Agretsuko, and you've got those kind of characters in there who are a little annoying, but somewhat endearing. The toucan is not endearing. He is a very
unlikable person, and you're meant to not like him.
Exceptionally unlikable. But yeah, the main thing I thought was that, like...
It just looks terrible.
Yeah, the funny factor does not override how terrible it looks in animation, in motion, and there's just too many anime out right now to really be like, I'm going to painfully watch this.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, it was genuinely funny. Like, I legit laughed during the first episode, and it's so ugly to watch. Like, the motions were, like, chunky, and they just didn't have enough frames per second, and it looked weird, and they wanted to do the whole thing with CGI, but then it was done with bad CGI, and it's like, oh, God, stop, please.
Yep.
And I think everybody I spoke to, either on Reddit or you name it, said the exact same thing. They're like, oh man, that was funny. I can't watch it. And I was like, yeah, I shared the same feeling, because I was like, there were times I legit laughed, and I was like, that's funny.
I like
the whole tail thing.
Yeah.
That got me good, but...
And the lion character is great. I thought that he was really enjoyable.
Yeah, we should give you kind of an idea. We'll do like we did last time and tell you a quick little summary about what's going on. Basically, as it sounds, Africa Salaryman, we have our main character who's a lion, who is our salaryman, who also works with other animals that are kind of, what's the word I want to use?
Anthropomorphic?
Yeah, basically animals that act like people. And his 2 closest co-workers are a toucan, the one that's insufferable, and the other one that's a lizard of some kind that has a removable tail.
Iguana, maybe? I'm not sure.
Definitely wouldn't be an iguana, because of his features and the fact that his tail is removable. It'd probably be something like a gecko or
could be, yeah.
Something that has a removable tail.
He was nice too.
But yeah, he was nice. It's just a toucan that was really obnoxious. But at the same token, still funny. But yeah, that's really all we can say. We watched the first episode and it was just hard to watch.
Yes.
So that's all it was. So let's move on. After School Dice Club. It was something that's genuinely cute.
Yes.
Like, it gives you good feels, and I know for some people it might not be up their alley. It's kind of like Yuru Camp, but for games.
Yes. That would be the exact way. The characters aren't that endearing yet.
Yeah.
Like, Yuru Camp busted through for a reason. Like, those characters were just...
super
amazing.
Awesome, yeah.
And it also helps that the same voice, in the Japanese that we're watching it in, the same voice actress that was in Yuru Camp is also in After School Dice Club.
I believe so. I think we saw that.
We checked it out.
Oh, yeah. Did we? Okay.
Yeah, we checked it out because I was like, that sounds an awful lot like her. And then we checked it. Oh, it is.
I don't know if it was it?
Yeah, it is.
Oh, I'm tired. Anyways, either way. And the only thing I can say at first appearance was like, I was like, why did they look like old school like manga where their eyes are just a little too big and the face is like weirdly uncanny valley at times. But other than that, it kind of grows on you and you get used to the animation. It's not bad. It's just something you would have seen in older manga.
Yeah. There's a couple of anime that definitely evoke an older style this season.
But we'll get into that.
Yeah.
Basically, the summary of the show is our main character, somebody who is kind of socially awkward and has had a bad past with any kind of game where she doesn't do well or was kind of teased about it. And then she runs into 2 other girls, one that works at a game store and another one that's just more outgoing. And due to circumstance, they end up together and they end up playing games. Mm-hmm. And during the episodes, they basically explain the game they're going to play, what the rules are basically, and then them playing it. Which seems kind of basic, but at the same token, it's very interesting in the sense of being introduced to a game that are real. So when you're learning are real games, and they talk mostly about German games. And that's also interesting, just me being German as well. But I think it's enjoyable. It's pretty chill. Some of the characters that have kind of come into the fold, like we had the guy come in on the second episode, which was super endearing and cute.
Yes. That's the perfect terms, the perfect word choices for this anime is like, it's endearing, it's sweet, it's charming. And yeah, it does have that same sort of Yuru camp feel. It's not as picturesque and beautiful, obviously, because that's, you know, Yuru camp was going for that vibe of being outdoors and whatnot. But it does something similar, which I think might be, with the success of Yuru camp, maybe we're going to see more of these sorts of anime coming out, which is like, here's something that maybe isn't appreciated as much as it used to be, and let's show how cool it is. Sugar and I, with our friends, we do board game night like once every couple of weeks. So, and that's something that I'll admit I wasn't really too big into board games until we started doing that. And now we've got all of these fancy ones that take like 3.5 hours to play, and that have like a bag full of dice and all this sort of stuff. And we love it. Like, it's so much fun. And I tell all of my friends about how I'm like, just get into board games. Like, board games are more than just, you know, Monopoly and Clue and Risk. Like, there's a board game for literally any weird, fascinating thing you might be interested in. It's really neat.
Yeah, and I like that it kind of points out in the episodes as well, because I feel that way with our friends too, is that each one of us likes a specific type of game, and we know who will win that game. And it's kind of like that in the show. You have like personalities, and you kind of get an understanding of what they would have a best advantage of in the game. Or like, some people are terrible liars. Our friends know that I am bad at those games because I am horrific at lying. Because I usually laugh. Whereas, you know, I'm really good at games that are more creative and artistic, kind of like Dixit, stuff like that. So it just depends. But the show is really sweet. It's a good time. Nothing too intense. It's pretty chill. Give it a chance. And it's cute girls doing cute stuff. And
somebody who I'm friends with on message boards that I go to, they weren't feeling it when it was the Japanese, but when the English dub came out, they said, like, having that be in English just clicked for them a lot easier.
And sometimes that's with any anime. You'll know what you like. Sometimes the dub just isn't working in general and it kills it for you. Other people, like one of my good friends, she will only do the subs. I have another friend that will only do dubs. So it's to each their own. You'll know what you like.
Yeah. And it's nice when, you know, you actually have that option. There's a few anime that are out this season that don't look like they're getting a dub anytime soon. And you're like, oh, well, okay, like, that just means that there's certain people who won't watch it, but yeah.
Well, let's move on. Next up is Ascendance of the Bookworm. It's been okay. Jeff hasn't watched it yet. I have. I've tried to cruise through everything here.
This is the only one out of everything that
I think everything else he caught up with me when he got some time. So anyways, Ascendance of the Bookworm. It's a pretty basic concept, and it's pretty... I don't want to call it boring, but it's very much... I've always been that kind of person that's like, if... Of course, we just had one about a board game, but that's a little different to me. When people are doing normal things, it's kind of boring to me in a sense. It's not bad, it's just kind of is what it is. So let me give you some background on the show. It's about a girl who died and is brought back and kind of reincarnated as a young girl. And she gets some of her memories back of what happened before she obviously went into this new body. And this new body, of course, she's frail, she's young, she's weak, she's always sick. And she's in a world where her favorite thing is books. And in this new world, books, like it was back in history, was basically only for noble people and people who were literate. So it's kind of a challenge for her to try and find a book, which you'll see what happens. And then her trying to conceive the idea if she can make her own book and what that would entail. So far it's just kind of her going about her daily life and kind of having the struggle of always being ill and all trying to find a way to get a book. And that's what the show is basically about. So it's nothing interesting per se. I guess it almost mirrors kind of the concept of the, can I say, canon of the book, so to speak.
Yeah.
Because she talks about, like, oh, well, if I do papyrus, well, if that doesn't work, I can do clay, because that was a very, like, you know, time period in Egypt, and blah, blah, blah. So it is somewhat informative in that way, so that's neat. But that's, again, of course, most of you know as listeners, I am very much into history, so it's not something for me like, oh, I didn't know that. I already know that.
Yeah, I think in university we both took a class called History and Future of the Book, which is all about, you know,
the entire history of writing printed books.
Yeah, of printed books. And so getting to, as a sidetrack, getting to hold paper from like 500-600 years ago is really interesting.
Yeah,
it's
we
really
did that
neat.
too. So if you haven't gotten that vibe already, huge nerds. So the show, like, the animation's okay, the characters are okay. I would say, like,
it's okay.
It's okay.
It's like the anime is okay.
The animation isn't anything special. It's just consistent in being okay. The story's consistent in what it wants to portray. And my computer hates me. Every time. But anyways, it's just okay. Unless this is something that you're really into, and like I said, you're kind of like me, where you're into history of the book and stuff like that. That might be interesting. Otherwise, there's not a lot of substance to it. It is just a story about a girl who likes books.
And it is a stacked season, so...
Yeah. So if you want to come back to it later, or if this sounds like it's up your alley, go nuts. But for the common viewer, I don't think many would be that interested. Who knows? Let me know if I'm wrong. So, with that being said, let's go on. Next is Babylon, and that was kind of a surprise for me. It was something that I hadn't heard anything about going in. I chose not to hear anything about it. Right away, we were given 3 episodes.
Yep.
And it impressed me. But at the same token, it gave me that lingering feeling that it could go badly, too.
Yeah,
it's just the fact, like, I never read the manga. And I was told there's a manga. I don't know where it's going to go. And I don't know if it's just going to go down in writing or keep consistent. Because this kind of writing is hard for a lot of people to make it substantial throughout. And why don't you give the summary this time? I've been giving summaries. Let's hear your take.
Gosh, the summary of Babylon, and I mean, you can correct me if I'm, you know, mistakening some things. It is... Well, it's... So the idea seems to be that we are following an investigator. I don't know if he's like a detective. He works with a particular branch of the government, and he and his partner are just kind of looking into some allegations against people. He's investigating like a pharmaceutical company for some wrongdoings, and then it's some like murder ends up happening, which is really like, oh, okay, you don't really see that coming, especially when, you know, these guys, they aren't like FBI agents or anything like that. They're not going after murderers or anything. So some murder starts to happen, and then it takes like a really weird turn where it turns out that this pharmaceutical company has been represented behind the scenes by like really big time people that are trying to run like this whole new area of Japan, and it just turns into this like the pharmaceutical company is working towards this goal that's all about essentially how to phrase it, because I don't want to give away too much.
That's okay, but I'll help you out.
Basically, this new area of Japan is going to be used as a testing ground for like all new medications. Like, because the laws typically, you know, take, and this is the same, you know, pretty much anywhere, the laws take about 5 to 10 years of testing before medication is allowed to be consumed by the general public. And so these people who are trying to run this new area of Japan are all like, well, why don't we just let people use whatever they want to use here, and we'll just find out that way if medication works or not. And so we've got these guys who are, you know, taking a look at different pharmaceutical companies, and then they end up running afoul of these really big political powers, and then it becomes an issue of like what is justice? What should you do to what do you do to like pursue justice? Is what they're doing because everybody is saying they're okay with it. They're doing things. They're just asking people, you know, if you want to live this way, come to this new area. So it's like, well, if people are voluntarily just deciding to do that, do you really need to get involved? It's it's definitely going to get into a lot of kind of higher level thinking in terms of, what is justice and what is freedom, and how much faster would science improve if we didn't have the barriers of, human safety and all that sort of stuff. It's going in a lot of weird directions, which is why I think that you're like, this could become a crapshoot of terrible.
Yeah. It
could. 3 episodes in, and everything has made pretty good sense, but it's a lot of stuff packed in.
Yeah. So like Jeff was saying, and I'll add a little more here, basically it's kind of like a new district of Tokyo. And these investigators are looking into a pharmaceutical company, which you said, but looking into the company, they find out some of the things that aren't right. The stuff that's kind of separate, but joined with the pharmaceutical company.
Yeah.
And the more they look into things, the more bodies keep piling up. And things keep happening, and they start finding a link. And as they keep going on, more people keep dying. Not from the pharmacy in the sense of drugs necessarily, but in the sense that other people are at play. And you find out that some big people are at play. There's a mayoral election in this area right now, and like Jeff said, they try and bypass a lot of laws to see what would happen and compare it to the main kind of population and see what could be gotten away with. It's kind of like an experimental ground, being like, okay, if we do this here, how successful would it be outside? What would be the bad things that would happen if we just push this forward instead of waiting, like you were saying, the 5 years or whatever.
And there's definitely, like, a lot of this is based off of some, real world discourse where there are lots of scientists who are like, we would be so much further ahead if we weren't so concerned with, making sure everything is ethical and everything. There's lots of scientists out there who've said, like, I would test my stuff on myself, but it's illegal. Yeah. It's not considered ethical. And it's like, and I want to jump research ahead by 20 years, sort of thing.
And it's such an interesting thing because it works for both of us. I guess I'm talking for Jeff, but I feel like he would feel this way. It's like, I'm really into the whodunit part of it.
Yeah, the
like
police procedural.
The police procedural in the sense of, like, we have an idea that there's players that they're pulling a lot of the strings, and they seem to be in these places at the times that bad things are happening. But then on Jeff's side, there's the whole mayoral thing, and then they have, like, the kind of agreed upon, oh, of course everyone's in on it, but then everyone has their own kind of faction of, well, we're in on it, but not that far. Like, we're going to have our own agenda. And it's like, what the fuck is happening? And then it's very much like, oh, I don't want to get into it, but I'm going to say there's very much moments of, like, concepts from Satoshi Kon.
Yep.
And I'm like, fuck, this is good. And, like, I'm kind of nervous because, like, it could all go to shit. Like, this could go so badly. This could all seem like a great idea, and then they don't know what to do with it. I don't know. We'll see. It's caught a lot of people's attention. It's definitely caught ours. The animation's been good. The story's been good. The characters have been interesting. It's stuff that, like, we're always, like, guessing in the episode. And we're like, well, that had to be this, right? And we're like, I don't know, because they weren't there. So does that mean that's not them? So we were going back and forth, and I love it, where it gives you a chance, because there's things that we both guess, and I think they're viable, but until other things happen, we won't know if they are true. So that's the thing. It's really exciting.
And the main character, like our antagonist, or protagonist, sorry.
Yes.
He's, our protagonist. He's a really likable guy, and you understand kind of the moral and ethical, quagmire that he's in, right? Where he's just like...
So once he finds out about these things, he realizes they're illegal, but then to get to what he wants, he has to find justice on something that's illegal, which he is totally against. The fucks with everything. That
he's very much like he's a good boy. And he's always kind of viewed things in a very black and white sort of manner, where, like, you're breaking the law.
Or you're not.
Or you're not. And now he's like, well, the people who are making the laws are kind of breaking the law, but in a way that I sort of understand and appreciate what they're going for.
And I'm hired by them, but I want to do these other things, which they're allowing me to do, but under this contingency. And it's like, what the fuck is happening?
And it's done so well, because earlier, like in the very first episode, that was one of the people he's working with were just like, what is your idea of justice? And then he never really answers it. It just kind of goes by, and he's like, what are you talking about?
There's several moments.
I'm sorry. Like, don't worry about it. And I was like, oh, man, that was such a nice little seed to drop there.
Oh, and there's, like, this moment where you're, like, on bated breath, because I won't say who or what, because it'll give some things away. But he's having a conversation with somebody else, and they're like, do you think that's a good or bad thing? He's like, well, obviously that's a bad thing. She's like, oh, really? Like, then you must think this way. He's like, well, no, of course not. But it's like, but you just said that you said that was bad. So in this situation, it has to be bad. And it's just like, what the fuck is happening? This is like, she's right, but also he's right. It's like, where's this gonna go?
Very philosophical. And I mean, I think you could tell from how we're discussing it whether or not it's going to be something that you're really into or not.
Yeah, if you like stuff that's like a mind fuck, you like stuff that's philosophical, if you like stuff like the police procedural and a mystery, dive in. I think if you're a fan of Satoshi Kon, you'll like it.
I would say I feel like this is going not in the same vein of like, you know, where the story is going or anything like that, but just in terms of how underappreciated it might be, like similar to like Banana Fish. I feel like Banana Fish last year was not really seen by a lot of people. Yeah. People who did see it were, you know, raving about it, but just not a lot of people saw it. And I feel like Babylon is going to go the exact same way, where I think a bunch of people are going to be like, that was great, that was amazing, and a whole schwack of other people are just going to be like, I couldn't watch that. Like, that's way too
high a concept.
Yeah, I don't want to do that. So I think it's going to be one of those anime where maybe in like 5 to 10 years people look back and they'll be like, oh man, did you ever watch Babylon? That was really good. And but
we'll see.
Like I said, it is a stacked season.
Yeah. So you never know. Like we said, the writing could just totally eat shit. So we'll have to see. We'll see. But let's move on. Next up is Beastars, and that was one of the ones that I'd heard so much about, I tried to not listen. There was so much about, like, on Reddit, on everything, and I didn't want to know if it was good or bad. I just knew it was everywhere. So I knew it had its own manga, and I didn't want to read it. And once I saw the trailer, I was really worried because it looked like bad CG. And once I started watching, I wasn't off-put by it as much as I thought I'd be, because as a lot of you know, I'm really a stickler for CG, but Beastars kind of goes between nice shots of animation and CG, where it kind of flows. I see some of the frames are a little too slow at times, but it doesn't put me off like other stuff I've watched where I'm like, oh my god, I can't be in this moment because I don't feel it, I don't believe it, whatever. But Beastars, to kind of give you an idea, we start the show with somebody dying, and the entire campus is all animals. Well, anthropomorphic, like people.
Yeah,
like we were saying
anthropomorphic
before.
animals, yep.
And so all of these people are at the school. It's kind of like Zootopia in the sense that we have carnivores and herbivores, and since this death happened, it's kind of raised the question of who killed this person and why did they do it, and obviously it was a carnivore. So now it's kind of the question of who is it, why is it happening, and why now, sort of thing. But in the meantime, we have kind of our school dynamic of, you know, kind of what you'd see in a normal school, of people that are the underdogs, the top-notch, the douchebags, you know, sort of thing. And so we kind of go through the characters of ones that have been, like, you know, had different kind of bullying happen to them and so forth. And I don't want to say too much because it'll give it away. But it's been, in my opinion, really good and really interesting.
Yeah. I think that we should at least say that, like, the school, the focus that we have in the school is with, like, a musical theater club, essentially.
And that's where the title Beastar comes from. It's the person who...
Star. Beastars.
Beastars. Be a star, yeah. It kind of works at different levels. Is, like, the person in the school that kind of gets the most kind of social points and kind of is an upstanding student and is, like, in acting and so forth in the school and is, like, the person. So that's kind of the significance of the title. Yeah, I don't want to say much more because
I think we can say a little bit more.
Go ahead.
So I mean, it's definitely. I would be shocked if it wasn't inspired by Zootopia in some way, shape, and form, because
I'm not
it definitely
when the manga came out. Quite honestly,
yeah,
like, there's a lot of things that jive together, like philosophically.
Yeah, because there is definitely this idea of looking at society based on preconceived notions and prejudice and whatnot, because there is a prejudice against both sides, and some of the characters reference that quite readily and quite, you know, and quite early.
So published in 2016. So,
yeah, so Zootopia definitely would have been a big inspiration, because, like, one of our main characters, who's a carnivore, just flat out says, like, no, I'm used to being, like, feared. I'm used to being thought of as terrifying and scary. He's like, that's fine.
And he's like the sweetest softie, and I'm like, oh.
And then there was like one of the herbivores is considerably smaller than most of the other ones, or at least for their species. And they're like, everybody looks at me like I'm somebody that needs to be protected, like I'm somebody that needs to be defended or taken advantage of, like one of those two sort of things. And so obviously there's a lot of parallels there between, you know, our society and the society that exists here, which is the same thing Zootopia was doing. And Zootopia also has this idea of, you know, oh, we're all living together, but you never know when the carnivores might just flip their lid.
Right.
And Beastars also has that sort of thing where the students flat out are like, oh, you get expelled if you're ever caught, you know, like hunting. If you're ever caught kind of skulking and it looks like you're, you know, going to do something like that,
right,
that you get expelled or suspended or something like that. And so I like the fact that all of that stuff is already, like, it's established.
Yeah, it's like a huge no-no. They make it very clear, like in the cafeteria, there's no meat. It's all like altered diet, so you get what you need without the meat.
Yeah, and so I like the fact that that also shows that this is a society that has struggled to get to this point, that this has been a challenge in the past. This is probably something that has happened before, thus why those rules are in place. Yeah, the CG itself, I would argue it's not pretty. I don't think anything about it is particularly pretty, but at the same point, it's not off-putting. Some shots are kind of off-putting, but when you take a look at them in context, they're supposed to be. But it is, I'm very shocked, because Zootopia was one of those films that I felt like really raised the bar for animated features. Mm-hmm. And so to see an anime come along and kind of take in those concepts and do them in a different, unique way, I'm definitely all on board for that. I wasn't really... The high school that I grew up in didn't have that sort of an atmosphere, so that's always a little weird to me to see just how, like, competitive it is and how, like, you know, especially like in the theater portion of it where it's like, oh, you missed that one step, like, you are worse than scum. I'm just like, oh, okay, like, I never grew up in that sort of an atmosphere
I had that kind of a school.
With high school, but I know that exists, and even like, and so. There's a character who the whole time I'm like, don't be a douche, just don't be. But and I'm
in
like,
a way, it gives a moment of him like not being a douche, and it's like, oh, well,
no, he's nice. Just. And my worry was like, oh, he's just going to be this, like, essentially this douche racist almost, and it was like, no, he's just super competitive. He wants to be the best, and anybody who is going to screw that up.
Is scum to him.
Yeah, is terrible. And yes, he isn't above using people, but at the same point, he was also like, you know, I owe you one. Like, thank you for the help. So I'm like, okay, like, so he's a douche, but he's not a douche. And I am really intrigued to see where it's going to go. It's weird in the sense that I could see it going kind of like a more cutesy direction, or it could continue to kind of be very mature in its themes and tackle kind of broader, you know, social issues. But it might, and I think it's going to kind of skirt right through the middle, just like Zootopia did, which is what made Zootopia so successful.
Right.
It's the fact that kids could watch it and they would get the themes and they'd be like, oh, this is cute. Like, look at these cute characters. I like this. But then people who are older, adults, kind of really saw what they were actually doing.
But I would say, in comparison, Zootopia was, I would say, for a younger audience, whereas this, I'd say, is for a little mature audience, especially with some of the stuff we've seen.
I don't know if I would... I doubt it's rated at like 17.
I'll take
13 plus, I would probably...
I'll take a quick look now and see what the rating is, but I'd definitely say it's for an older crowd than what was for Zootopia, just because...
Well, I mean, Zootopia was rated PG, or G in general, whereas this is definitely higher than that. But I don't think it's like, it's not like it's going to go Made in Abyss levels of like, ooh, that is mature content.
Well, not that dark, but...
Yeah, I don't think it's going to go that.
Let's go see.
But,
it's marked as a shonen, so teens.
Yeah. And yeah, I was impressed that the content of it is good enough that even the spotty, odd-looking CG does not detract from it at all.
Yeah, it's kind of like it goes between, like, really nice animation to CG. And sometimes you can see the transition, but overall it's nothing that makes me be like, oh, that was so bad. And oh my god, and by the second episode they had the opener, it's all claymation, it's super cute. Yes. I was like, oh my god, that's so adorable.
Yeah, the LP is very good. It's going to be one of those that I think there's going to be a lot of people who are just going to absolutely love it.
And if you like the game, what's the one with Big B?
Fables.
Yeah.
Fable.
If you like Fables, those kinds of games, I think you'd like this too, because I feel like there's some parallels in there, and you'll know it once you see it. So, but yeah, I liked it, and I think it'll be pretty good. Yeah,
I don't have any doubts that it will continue to be very good in a very, very stacked season.
Yeah, let's move on. Next up was Blade of the Immortal, and it was kind of disappointing because, let me go in and say, I thought it would be kind of like Ninja Scroll, and we did get some vibes of that, but it was more of a headache, quite honestly, and that's why we dropped it. Mm-hmm. It was very much moving too fast. As I was trying to say, moving too fast. The pacing was off. It was just thrown at you, and it's just like, oh, except that these are characters now. We don't need to do backstory, and I'm like, oh, okay, like... And it's just like every fucking 5 seconds, it's flashing lights, and it's red and black and all sorts of shit.
Lots of white, like lots of contrasting shots. Which, at the end of the day, the biggest thing that I remember of it from watching the first episode, I was like, that gave me a headache.
Yeah, and that's what it gave me too. And I was like, I don't want to watch it anymore.
Yeah, and the first episode was not. It didn't do enough to drive me away from the fact that it gave me a headache. And
so, long story short of what the premise of the show is, there's a girl whose family was slaughtered. She goes to seek vengeance. She gets told to meet up with this fellow, our main character, so to speak, who ends up being immortal. He goes with her to take out some of these people. And, of course, these people are super fucked up in the sense, like... Let's just say the first guy they take out is body modification? Let's call it that.
Yep.
And so they're kind of twist fucked up people, kind of like you'd see in like Ninja Scroll or Basilisk, stuff like that. But it just wasn't enjoyable. It wasn't anything where I was invested. It wasn't anything that I cared about. Like, let alone the flashing lights and just headache nightmare. It just wasn't anything new. It wasn't anything that intrigued me, and I was really on board with it. Like, we both when we saw the trailer, we're like, fuck, this is gonna be so good. It's gonna be fucking samurai.
It's sort of like, and hey, for all I know, because a lot of these adaptations that are coming out now are from, manga from a long time ago. And I heard the original was
bad too.
Yeah, so I mean, who
knows? They'd already done an anime.
But it almost felt like they had seen Ninja Scroll, and then they saw Kill Bill, and they were like, what if we, combine these two elements together?
Yeah. And not, the best parts of either of them, just the parts that were there.
Oh, by the way, let's make our main character immortal, because,
Good reasons.
All right. And so, if there's a way that you can do this sort of thing. Yeah. Ninja Scroll is not a story that is, it wasn't revolutionary. It's the kind of story that you hear about all the time.
At its time, I feel like it was a big deal, and it still continues to be a big deal. But it was done well.
Yeah,
in the
sense, that's where it was going.
The opening thing I remember from I remember the first time ever watching it was the bridge scene.
Oh yeah,
and that still sticks with me. I remember it exactly as it happened. But like this, I'd be like, oh yeah, that happened, and then that happened, which was weird. It'd be like, that was weird, I didn't expect that. And I was like,
yeah.
It'd be like me weeding through what happened. Like, it just was so much stuff.
The only thing I'll give credit, I kind of liked our main protagonist. I thought that our immortal,
he
samurai
had
guy.
Very, Confucius says sort of thing, where it's just he's just the only line I was like, that was good, was she was like, well, I want you to help me, get revenge for my family. And he's just like, was your family good? Did they do bad? Because everybody who wants vengeance is always on the good side, and it's just even when they're not, and it's
she's just like,
She's like, of course they were good. It's just like, I doubt it.
He's like, I know that I've heard of this group of people. They normally don't just aimlessly massacre anyone.
Yeah. Something happens.
Yeah, and I guess the way they explain it is the reason he's immortal is that he has this curse where he now has to like do away with evildoers or something. So he's always got to be very picky about the stuff that he does.
I'm gonna lose my mind because it was based. I don't know if it actually was, but in my mind it was based on another story of basically somebody who'd killed so much that they had to make up for the people that they killed. It's another folklore tale, but anyways, it was just meh. And it was such a headache.
Yeah, if it didn't give us a headache, I would have given it a shot to see like, are you going to be monster of the week? Is that what this whole premise is going to be? Where it's like
is it going to be like Dororo? Is it going to be like Samurai Champloo? Is it going to be? And it was just nothing that I wanted it to be. And I was like,
and at the end of the day, it gave me a huge headache, and I've had to miss out on some really good stuff because it just the material gives me a headache.
And that's saying a lot because I easily get headaches. Jeff doesn't. So for him to get a headache, it's pretty bad. Yeah.
There's only a few things that, like, something like Hotline Miami, that video game gave me a headache. So, like, regardless of how great it is, I can't play it.
Yeah.
I could play it in, like, 10-minute increments because it just gave me a headache.
Right.
This also gave me a headache. And it wasn't the source material. What they showed us was not worth the headache.
Yeah, no. That's the part. If it was really good, I'd be like, maybe it gets better in the second episode and it's not so heavy. Like, I'll watch it. But there was nothing there to give me, like, oh, this is so interesting, like, blah, blah, blah. It's very much like, oh, like Kill Bill, like Jeff was saying, where it's like, we have these baddies and there's something unique about each of them and they're just going to go and slay them. It's just like, so what? Like,
it made me want to go and watch Ninja Scroll again.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Watch something that's actually good. So, let's move on. Next up is Dr. Stone. We're continuing with, I would say the last few episodes have definitely gotten my interest more than what it has. Not to say it wasn't getting interesting, it's just now it's like, oh, that makes sense. Or like, I'm glad that was explained because now that is not bullshit, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So as you know, with Dr. Stone, we've explained before, but I'll do a quick synopsis. We have our main character who is a scientist, and basically everyone else who isn't.
Yes.
Something happens in the world where everyone turns to stone, and then due to, as far as we've seen, something chemical happening, people have awoken from their stone and become human again, but there's only a certain amount, and kind of we're going about realizing some people are huge dicks and other people are very pro-science.
It's
but the people that are anti-science and people who are pro-science. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, you've got somebody who likes the idea of, like, let's keep this as a more kind of natural world. And I really wish that they would have done a better job of making him seem less douchey than he is. Cause, like,
so that's another thing I guess I can explain really quick. He was, as far as we saw from the stone people to come out, was Senku, which is our main guy. And then after dilemmas happen, they awaken somebody from the stone that they know is an athlete, but he's more than an athlete. He's like
he's Tarzan.
He's a super freak Tarzan, where it's just like, yeah, I can fucking punch a lion in the face and kill it. It's like, what?
Didn't kill it. He just made it go away. But he punched it into a tree.
Well, isn't that where he got his coat from? He killed the lion, and he's made a cape.
I don't know if he killed it.
I'm pretty sure he killed it.
He punched it through a tree, so I mean, maybe he killed it.
I'm pretty sure because that's where he has his cape from. It's all fur.
Could be.
Anyways, obviously we weren't awake on that one.
He killed Mufasa.
But he definitely punched a lion in the face and made it get the fuck out. But he's just like a beast of a person, and he very much is against waking up the adults because he feels like that's part of the problem of why society fell, even though we don't know exactly what happened. Whereas Thanku is very much like, no, we should wake up everybody because that's science and that's fair. Like, you don't get to pick who does or doesn't get out. And so they've kind of both gone their own ways, but at the same token, the other guys tried to kill Senku several times. But at the moment, they're separated and doing their own thing. I won't get into what because I don't want to spoil anything. But anyways, they're both doing their own thing right now. I guess it's a little bit of a... Well, you know, whatever. He's the main character. It's not a spoiler. Where they're both doing their own thing. And, yeah. And so lately they've gotten kind of more into what happened before the kind of petrification happened. and things like that, and kind of getting into why some of the things are the way they are after waking up, which I find more interesting. Before it's kind of like, oh, science experiments, but which is great and all, but us being teachers, I was like, I know that'll happen, so not a big deal. But now that it's kind of getting into more of like the deep meat of it, in a sense, it's kind of gotten me more interested. Again, I still stand by the fact that I don't know how it's so popular as a shonen, but it is what it is, and we're going to continue watching.
I mean, for all we know, because we haven't read the manga in any particular sense.
No.
We've had a tiny little bit of a spoiler just because we watched MatPat did a video about Dr. Stone, and he did spoil like one little thing in his theory as to what is going on.
Right, but we won't repeat it.
But I mean, you know, at the end of the day, it is entertaining. I have enjoyed it. I am kind of boggled as to how this is being like seen as like, oh, this and Promise Neverland we're going to be the two great. I'm like, Promise Neverland blows this out of the friggin' water.
Kills it.
I feel like Fire Force blows this out of the water.
Yes.
And lots of people, Dr. Stone got this, and I mean, maybe this is just an issue with the way that we as a community hype things up too much, but Dr. Stone got hyped up to the same amount, if not more, than like Promised Neverland.
I got like Naruto vibes. Yeah, like, oh, it's so fucking good, and I'm like, whoa.
I was like, okay, so I was expecting like, oh wow, so this is going to be like Naruto good. Yeah. I'm like, who knows? Maybe this will be like the next Full Metal Alchemist, like that good, and it didn't hit that. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, so then you have to like deprogram yourself and just be like, at the end of the day, am I enjoying this?
Yeah,
is it enjoyable?
For what it is, yes. It's enjoyable, but I still don't get the point where it's like, oh, it's so fucking good. It's like, it's okay. Like, consistently, you know, voice acting and animation-wise, it's been consistent.
We're watching the Japanese, by the way, because the dub, I think, is only 2 episodes behind, so
whatever. The Japanese sounds better.
I mean, I haven't heard any of it.
Oh, to me. So anyways, to me.
But I'm just saying that I always feel like we should say which version we're watching, especially if they're very close together, just because.
Well, I would say almost. Well, I guess we can't. I was about to say almost exclusively, like, especially for seasonal, we almost always watch the Japanese because it comes out right away. Especially for something like this, we want to watch it right away.
I mean, there's a couple.
Or sometimes it'll devolve later into English, or like My Hero Academia is always English. Like we've always done that because I love Christopher Saga. Among other people that are voice acting in there.
And so from what I've seen from people who were like us and weren't like big into Dr. Stone
everybody said the same thing to me, where it's like, I get what you're saying, because it's kind of like, it's
and that's my thing, is people who weren't big into it already are just kind of like it's all right.
Okay. Yeah, it's like, it's not like, a cat's pajamas, but it's a cat.
You know, it's like an 8 out of 10.
Yeah.
It got me more like the comedic elements have been very good.
Yeah.
And so it makes me laugh almost every episode. And that's why I said we're watching the Japanese, because we're 2 episodes ahead. The most recent episode we watched was very much about like the historical value to what happened before
the
timeline skip and everything like that. So and that was meaningful, and I really liked it. So I do have faith that they can do, you know, the big dramatic moments really well too.
We just haven't hit them yet.
Yeah, and who knows? Maybe it's just
a matter of time.
You know, I can't believe that it would have such a huge following without it like just continuing to improve. You know?
Yeah, who knows? We'll have to see. Because we'll be watching. Let's move on. So speaking of things that blow it out of the water, Fire Force.
We'll preface everything by saying that yes, we understand that at times we will talk about how there's too much fan service in something for us to enjoy it. That there is fan service in Fire Force.
Yes. Which is way more lewd in the manga. I was like, whoa.
Yeah. But at the same point, we also really enjoyed Fairy Tail, and that also has, you know...
I feel like it's a little different, though. Like I was saying to you, Fairy Tail was like, I feel like the creator truly loved his characters, and his female characters especially. Whereas Fire Force, like, I feel like he, like, maybe doesn't like women very much.
Well,
that's the impression I get.
You read
totally
the manga.
Wrong.
I would say from the anime's perspective, with it being
like,
toned down, I don't get that vibe.
Yeah,
but yeah, maybe with the manga. But I mean, also like we have to remember North America that we are not the target audience. The target audience is always going to be Japanese first.
Yeah, but still.
and like Japan just has a different sort of mentality with that sort of thing. And that's perfectly fine. Nothing about it so far has made me feel like there's a bar where it's like, oh, you know, that was kind of funny. Oh, ew. And it never hit more than like a, huh? Like, it was an odd choice to have that happen, but it never felt like, ew. I never got that vibe. And the fact that everything else about the show is awesome. Like, that helps a lot. It helps a lot when everything about the show is awesome, and then, like, those couple of moments you're just kind of like, well, that was weird, but okay, like, we're done.
Let's just blow past that.
Yeah.
But I'd say, we've explained it before, but again, for those of you who are just catching on right now, quick synopsis. Fire Force is about people who, first, second gen, you know, going forth, have different abilities, those that can create fire, manipulate fire, or do both. So we have people that are different fire forces, so kind of like what you think of normal firefighters, but then they have these different gens so that they're there helping fighting with fires, and then they also have different people like nuns to kind of do the prayer to kind of put people to rest. So they're trying to figure out why human combustion happens. And so different fire houses have different objectives. Some are just kind of like just living and trying to live the best life possible, where other ones are more invested of why combustion happens, and other ones that are doing like heavy research. And we kind of get a feeling for some of them so far, and it's been really good. The action is stellar. Yes. The animation is stellar. It's been so good. I love Todd Havercourt, so he's our main character.
We're watching the English. Where Sugar earlier was like, we watch almost everything in Japanese.
Well,
so
it's
like,
been continuing.
Literally, we're watching this.
Like I said, we started Japanese, then we folded into English, because it's like, oh, it's Todd Havercourt. But anyways, so yes, now it's English. So anywho, it's been really good. It's been great. The scenes that have action, it's like, fuck yes.
It's like...
And they have like the right sound effects to make it awesome.
Yes.
Which is like, I can't stress enough how important that is when you have a fucking awesome fight. Take like Naruto, for example. Just listen to fights. Don't even like look at them fighting. Listen to it. That's what this one does well too. Where it's like all the right sounds when they hit.
It's a weird thing to have to say, but they know fire really well.
It's so well. If you ever watch Fire and see some people try and animate it, it just looks like a streak of colors. But having it in Fire Force, it's just so beautiful.
It's beautiful.
It's like, fuck.
It's beautiful when it needs to be beautiful. It's terrifying when it needs to be terrifying.
Yes, Maki
it is comedic when it needs to be, comedic. And I love the fact that in this world where, humans are spontaneously combusting, and you've got, just so many different, cultures around it. There's people who are, worshipping it as basically, that we are going to become the next sun. What are we trying to do to stop it? Why are we trying to stop it? Let's praise the sun. There are people who are like, this is terrifying, and we need to do everything we can. Even if our research isn't very ethical, we need to figure out what's happening. Yeah. There's groups who are like, all we care about is bringing rest to those who had this sort of thing happen to them.
We make it more like Day of the Dead, where it's a celebration, and it's a big thing.
And somewhere it's like, good job for holding out this long, and they have a big party about it rather than...
super sweet.
Yeah, and just all of these different things, it was like in Made in Abyss, where human culture is going to react to these things in very different ways, and showing all of those off is really good. The only thing that I can ever really complain about, I feel like, is that sometimes moments that should be really big fights seem to go really fast. It feels like maybe they're pushing the pace too much. But then other people have been complaining and saying that it's really slow. Where I said, I like the slow introspective moments.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people in real life too, let alone watching anime, are really uncomfortable with silent moments. And they don't know
do
what
it
to do.
so well in Fire Force.
And it's intended because... And people are like, well, I don't like the pacing. But I was like, it's intentional that they keep these awkward moments because things aren't always like, oh, well, that chapter's done and everything's happy. It's like, no, we have people who are tormented by this. People who are unhappy because obviously somebody they love died. And yet you have to do it in a respectful way. But by the end of the day, you don't feel like you did anything. Mm-hmm. Like, it's a very mixed emotion.
And I feel like it reflects what being a firefighter is, where a lot of being a firefighter is a lot of slow, like, just nothing happening, and then immediately something happens, and you have to be going a mile a minute. And so I feel like the anime does a very good job of expressing that sort of a feeling where...
And I feel like, adding to that, I feel like that's maybe why people have the disconnect, is because in the chapters it feels like it plays out a little longer. But when you're actually dealing with fire, it's so fast. Like, when people talk about backdraft, like, that's instantaneous. Like, when you're dealing with fire, it's fast. And I feel like even though people are creating and kind of manipulating fire, it's so much that the properties of fire act a certain way out in the air rather than being held on a page. And I feel like a lot of people, not that they don't understand that, it's just the fact that they don't...
Appreciate
it? Even appreciate it, but kind of like... put two and two together. It's kind of like, oh, it should be like the chapter, but it's like they can't hold out that long because with oxygen and fire, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
It's all science.
And they've done a very good job of, like, showing the limitations that these people have, where it's like, in the most recent arc of the anime, it's all about somebody who has pushed themselves too far.
And it's like you're literally burning.
Yeah.
It's like you're no longer producing now, it's coming internally. Yeah. And it's just like heartbreaking because they're doing it for the right reason, but they can't do anything to stop it.
And it makes sense in the fact that, like, yes, you are manipulating fire, but at the same point,
you're still a person.
Fire around you takes up all of the oxygen. So if you're using all the oxygen around you to power your fire, how are you breathing?
Yeah.
And
how are you not passing out?
And then it even goes further, where if people are pushing themselves even beyond the oxygen that's around them, they exhaust themselves very quickly because they're using the oxygen from their own body.
Yeah.
Like, everything about it to me has been very impressive. I feel like the voice work has been excellent in the English version. The sound effects in particular are amazing. I don't know how they got some of them. It almost feels like...
I would love to be in the room and just watch, like, show me how you got it.
Like I feel like they just went to somebody who is...
It's like they went to the slow-mo guys and it's like, take this sound and make it slower. So when they have the slow-mo moments, it's like... Woo.
Oh, I almost feel like they went old school and they just went to somebody, like, to people who are specialists on fire. I don't know what you'd call them. Pyro scientists? I don't know. And we're like... Can we record the sound that this makes?
Somebody who deals with pyrockinetics.
And they're just like, yeah, okay, that's fine. And so we have all of these sounds.
It's crazy.
The animation is amazing, and the fight sequences are, like, brilliant. It's so good. Yes, I will recognize that it has awkward fan service moments where you're just like, that felt weird and out of place.
Yeah.
And for some people, that will be enough to just kind of turn them away, especially since there's a million shonen out there, so you can find exactly what it is that you're looking for. Yeah. But it's been special. Very high quality.
Yeah, I find it special. Mm-hmm. But, needless to say, we think you should watch it. But let's move on. Next up is Kabukichou... Fuck! Wow! Let's do that again. Kabukichou Sherlock. So,
Sherlock.
Clap back. So, as any of you know who've been here since the start of the channel, I am a huge Sherlock fan. So this is one of those moments where I literally, without Jeff, had to go into a room and then play it, because I am the worst critic when it comes to Sherlock Holmes.
Oh yeah.
I am a huge fan. I've taken university classes just in Sherlock Holmes. So, I went to go watch it. And it was so funny. By the end, I was just kind of went up to Jeff and I was like, it was interesting. He's like, does that mean bad? I said, no. It was done in a way that I'm not mad about it.
Yes.
It's just a good thing.
Sugar has to be like, I did not dislike it. I was like, Okay. That's a weird way of saying that you appreciated it. Okay.
Yeah, because, like, I hated the first Sherlock Holmes with Robert Downey Jr. I hated it so much.
Sugar didn't mind the second one, but yeah, hated the first one.
The first one was heavily hated by me, and anybody who knows me knows how much I hate it. But anyways, the second one was tolerable for other reasons, but not completely satisfied. Anyways, not the point of the podcast.
The BBC series we really liked until that final episode, which was insulting.
So angry. Not even going to get into that. Let's stick to this.
Yeah, just to kind of give it some context.
Let's stick to this.
Sherlock Holmes is very important to Sugar.
I'm a huge fan. So, needless to say, let's give you an idea. So it's very much a modernized Sherlock Holmes. And we kind of meet our character, Watson, right off the bat. And we realize that he goes to this agency, kind of a bar, the Cat Pipe. And this is where different investigators are brought together to solve mysteries for money and, so forth. Kind of like a business venture. And we soon realize that different people have, obviously, the names of other Sherlock Holmes characters, like Mary, like Moriarty, things like that. And they're placed in different people of different ages. And so it's interesting to see, obviously this is very early, we've only watched the 2 episodes, of how they're going to play it out and if they're going to do kind of a verbatim what the books did in the sense of like pinning him against Moriarty, if this will be kind of different in the sense that if people don't know the story of Sherlock Holmes, if they'll play it differently. I think I know how they will play it, but I'm not going to say anything because it'll be a huge spoiler for those of you who don't know.
Also, and I don't believe that was in any of the originals, but for some reason, boy, people like to put Sherlock Holmes against Jack the Ripper a lot.
Yeah.
And that was, the first episode kind of has something to do with Jack the Ripper, which I was like, I mean, that's... Nothing about this is traditional Sherlock Holmes, which is fine. Like, it feels to me like if you are going to get away from the traditional, cap-wearing Sherlock Holmes, and you're going to put it in, like, today's time, this is the way to do it, where you just kind of push so far away from traditional that you're like, well, okay, like, everything is making sense. I love the fact that the agency that he works for is a bunch of different detectives, and they basically are either hired singularly or you hire them all at the same time, and whoever solves it gets the money. Like, I'm like, that's really neat. I like that convention because then it allows you to portray Sherlock Holmes in the way that you need to, which is that he is more about being challenged intellectually as opposed to it being about money. Whereas you can then show others who are more about money. It looks like it's very bright. It's very colorful. It is a very It is so different from anything that we've really, at least what I've ever seen Sherlock Holmes in before, where we're used to seeing, dark and dingy, and, Sherlock is this recluse and drug user and, all these sorts of things. But not to say that the series doesn't have those elements in it as well. One of the things that I thought was very funny, and this is from somebody who hasn't actually seen it at all, but the fact that he doesn't have like a mind palace, he doesn't... Well,
the mind palace is very much the Cumberbatch version.
Yeah,
so.
And he doesn't, like... And then in the Robert Downey Jr. films, he kind of like sees into the future and then he plays it back, and what he deduced would happen happens. This one, the way in which he kind of makes his deductions and discusses things is to perform Rakugo. Which everybody around is like, what in the hell is he doing?
Yeah, everyone's just like, yeah, it's pretty bad, but it's enjoyable.
Yeah. He is not very good at it, but you get kind of where he was coming from.
Where, like, for example, he'd be like, oh, did you hear about the girl who was, like, caught red-handed? And it's like, no, tell me about it. And it just goes through the whole thing. It's just like, well, she sure, like, fucked up sort of thing. Like, didn't swear, but, like, oh, yeah, she screwed up because of this. And it's just like, oh, man, why would she do that? He's like, well. And then she goes into, like, this two-way conversation with himself. Like Rakugo, like telling the story through two people talking. So that was enjoyable.
It's also like it's a really interesting setting because there's like a lot of cross-dressing that's going on.
Well,
there's a
that's
lot of
at the bar.
Yeah, but I mean like that, and maybe I don't appreciate exactly what they're trying to do because I don't know the area, but they make a very big assertion about how, oh, this is like the east side of town and we're like Vegas, baby, as opposed to the west side, and so they're making this sort of
I should just make a whole video of like the parallels of what it's trying to achieve because most people are like, I don't get it. But yeah, that's all you'll explain off the podcast.
At the end of the day, it is a very enjoyable version of Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, it's something that I enjoyed, and it wasn't something like I was so worried I was going to hate it because I was like, everyone does Sherlock Holmes wrong and they do everything wrong, and who knows where they'll go with some of the characters because obviously they've been introduced, but I don't know what they're going to do with them, so we'll see. I've had stuff like, obviously I've been invested, then it'd be a disappointing ending. Yeah, and just as a random little tidbit of fact, not a fact, a little kind of nodule of
a nugget of wisdom.
Nugget of wisdom, there we go. God, I can't have any of my wisdom. Nugget of wisdom. A lot of people, even though it's insanely untrue and disproven by many people believed Arthur Conan Doyle was Jack the Ripper. No lie. And that's why a lot of people put them together, other than the fact that obviously England. But
there's a lot of ways in which that falls apart at the very seams, but we'll still have fun.
And so a lot of people like focusing on that because obviously everyone likes Jack the Ripper. And is very much enthralled by that whole story, and other people are enthralled by Sherlock Holmes. It's like, oh, the perfect like solve, but Arthur Conan Doyle was very much about fiction, not about partial fiction. Can I say like
revisionist history?
Yeah,
that sort of
it
stuff.
Wasn't about that. Like a couple of the stories kind of hints at the Queen, obviously, but he would have never touched on a lot of things that were true. Like even I believe in one of the books, he kind of gives a reference to an area like regarding the Ku Klux Klan, but doesn't obviously say them by name. Anyways, off topic. Anyways, some people thought Jack the Ripper was Arthur Conan Doyle. Obviously, it was not. So a lot of people like pairing the two, especially the kind of geographical location. But otherwise, yeah. The show itself is interesting to me. I was kind of nervous pre-episode 1, but now that I've even seen the first episode, I'm pretty okay with it. And as long as they don't fuck up the ending or what they do with some of the characters, it seems like it'll be enjoyable.
I think that I will be okay with whatever they do because they've obviously made this like so far removed from source material that they're just going to do whatever they would like to with nods to the original.
Right.
You're not. I've said this before with a lot of things. You don't use something like Sherlock Holmes without it trying to be, inspired by the original.
Oh, trust me, I've seen lots inspired by and totally shitting the bed.
Yeah,
like destroying the essence of the character.
Thus far, it seems like, regardless of how far removed they are from the traditional. At least the traditional setting of Sherlock Holmes.
I don't mind it being in a new setting. It's just, I enjoy the fact that so far, his little oddities that a lot of people don't get or understand about his character without, being invested in Sherlock Holmes, where that's kind of, especially with the Rakugo and with the different kind of, can I say other tendencies he has, which is kind of changed into something else. I feel so bad, because I don't want to spoil anything, but at the same token, there's different things that they've covered, but you wouldn't know they covered unless you're a fan of Sherlock Holmes. So for me, that makes me happy, because they're kind of acknowledging that of his habits and what he does and people that are in his life, but without being like, oh, obviously this is that. It's like, I feel like it's a nice nod where it's like, okay, I'm
people
to terms
who
with this.
like Sugar, people who are huge fans will appreciate that, and then people who aren't the biggest Sherlock Holmes fans, I think, will still appreciate what it's doing.
Yeah,
there's enough there that if you're not a Sherlock fan, I've liked. I haven't read any Sherlock Holmes, like any of the Arthur Conan Doyle stuff, but obviously I know of him and I've seen a lot of different interpretations of him in lots of, you know, media. And so this, I'm like, this is cool. Like, this is fine. I have no problems with it. Yeah. I liked The Great Mouse Detective, and he was basically...
Oh, no.
And he was basically a version of Sherlock Holmes as well.
Oh,
so.
No, he wasn't.
I mean, he was. You just don't like certain aspects of that.
No. Just because he is a detective does not make him Sherlock Holmes.
He lived on the same street.
No, that doesn't matter. I don't care.
He is an interpretation of Sherlock Holmes that you hate. Which is fine because you hate a few of them.
Anyways, my favorite, by the way, is The Hound of the Baskervilles. But anyways.
Yeah.
But, anywho, it's good.
Yeah. It stands on its own even without the Sherlock nods.
Yes.
You'll just like it
if you
more.
see it just off, like just not knowing anything about Sherlock Holmes, it's a guy who is a detective who is very much not like regular people. He's not in it for the money. He's in it for the thrill of the hunt and the thrill of the mystery. He is very odd. He's peculiar. He has odd quirks. Something that's just relatable to a lot of people. I know even when I get to things, I have my own quirks.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting. The animation's pretty good. It's been consistent. The voice acting's been pretty good, especially with him going into Rakugo. It's been very delightful. It's somebody who's obviously invested in doing his character. Yeah, watch it. It's good.
It's good. Watch it.
Let's move on. Next one I dropped. Jeff is continuing. It's Kemono Michi Rise Up. It was so weird. Like, somebody said to me, it's like, oh, it's about wrestling. I said, oh, cool. Jeff loves wrestling.
Yes, I do.
It's like Sherlock Holmes. Wrestling is Jeff's thing. I'm along for the ride. And I'm like, oh, okay, I've grown to like it now. But the show started out funny, then it got creepy, and then it got weird. So it's very much... Okay, let me give you a sum of what happens. So we have this guy who's a wrestler, and it's kind of funny because he's doing monologue and stuff in the beginning. And then, obviously, a princess from another world calls upon him, and it's very much an isekai where it's like, blam, he's there. And funny things happen, and then as time goes on, you realize he likes pets, but not, like, just likes them. He, likes them, which is creepy. It gets into, like, furry territory, which isn't my cup of tea. Mm-hmm. And it just gets into uncomfortable territory.
I'm going to take the other side on this. Yes, it gets to a point where it's a little weird and uncomfortable. And I mean, that's fine. There's lots of people out there who absolutely adore animals, and other people are like, you like your dog way too much. Like, that's weird.
I've never liked my dog that much.
So I think that's kind of what they're trying to do. So the main thing is, yes, he's a wrestler by trade, but he's talking about how he really wants to open a pet shop. And
you can say whatever the fuck you want after doing weird shit.
It's fine. I'm going to go to bat for it a little bit. So
I'm putting down my bat and sitting on the base.
He is. It is definitely like it's a comedy. It is a comedy first. It's not trying to be serious. It's trying to make you laugh. Now, yes, he gets called to another world. It's an isekai, and then. Yeah, the princess is like, destroy all of these creatures. And he's like, what? And the best thing that happened in that first episode is he suplexes her for asking him to harm a creature.
Animals, yeah.
Because he doesn't understand at this point that monsters are different than animals. And then he leaves like the castle, and he goes in and he finds that the world around him, this area, whatever this is, this new world, because it is an isekai, is populated in part by, anthropomorphic creatures.
Yeah.
You know, furries. If you want to go that far, they're furries.
I wouldn't even say that they're furries. I'm just saying the stuff that's implied is very furry-esque.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's done for comedic effect.
It's not funny.
so yeah, like, when he first sees these, like, he sees a cat girl, and of course... Everybody else, this is just a normal everyday thing. In fact, they're kind of looked down upon. He freaks out in total excitement because he's like, this is adorable. Now, here's maybe where some things change. I watched the dub.
I watched the sub.
And you watched the sub. The dub definitely doesn't play up nearly as bad until the weird thing with the Cerberuses. It plays up more like he's like, you are adorable. Like, you are so cute. And that's how he reacts to them because he finds animals to be cute. Now, yes, that's kind of weird to the point where like he like tackles them and like tickles them.
Yeah,
and
in a
they have like
sexual way.
they
Like,
yes,
gross.
the characters have like this, you know, moment of ecstasy where they're just like, what? Like, and yes, it's comedic. It's
not
weird
funny.
though. I laughed at it. Sugar did not.
I did not. I found it more disturbing.
At the end is where I was kind of like, huh. But I'm going to continue watching it. I'm going to give it a shot, mainly because...
Where he, like, tackles a dog, then puts his face in its ass. And I was like, oh!
Sort of, yeah.
I was like, no.
He's trying to assert dominance.
No,
and yes,
that's not what was...
and then, yeah, like, he's holding on to this Cerberus, and he finds it so cute and adorable. And yes, it so happens that its butt is in his face.
It's
and
so
he's just
gross.
like... Yeah,
cringe.
and he has, like, hearts and stuff. And so yes, they're obviously playing up for comedic effect. They think that it's funny.
It's not.
It might play better for a Japanese audience than it does here because yes, lots of people are like, lots of people don't love the furry aspects. I first said I was like, I could do without the more overt kind of furriness, and then other people who've been watching it have said,
whatever you want to call it.
What? It's not going to go into that territory. My goodness.
Who knows? You could sleep with a wolf. I don't know.
Like I said, I think the whole idea is to kind of make you laugh and feel a little uncomfortable. Some people are going to feel more uncomfortable than others.
I'm okay feeling uncomfortable when it's a horror thriller. I don't like it. It's gross.
See, and I mean, and that's going to be the reaction people are going to have. I thought that it was funny. I'm going to give it another chance. I'm going to give it the 3-episode treatment. As I believe we call it, and see what happens.
I had one treatment, and I don't feel cured.
That's fine.
And I'm okay being sick.
You're allowed to feel that way.
I
laughed. I laughed a lot. I thought it was very funny. Sugar did not have that reaction, with exception to suplexing the princess.
Suplexing the princess was very promising for me. I was like, that's how most people would react.
And so,
it's not like, oh, I'm the hero. It's like, fuck this shit.
From what I have heard, it does eventually start to downplay those sorts of things.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So, like I said, I'm going to give it the 3-episode treatment. Ugh. I'm going to give it the 3-episode treatment, and we'll go from there.
And I'll be watching something else. Let's move on. Next one is Legend of the Galactic Heroes, The New Thesis, Stellar War, Part 1. So, it's kind of doing a Digimon try where they're having a movie, but it's split into 4 episodes. So we're just putting this in here right now. And it's been good!
Yes, it has been... I have to stop myself from watching the original so much, because, like, every part of me is like, oh man, like everything about this has been so good. I could just go and watch the entirety of the story, even though it's like
I will watch it at some point.
It's a lot of episodes.
Not in a season like this where it's, I got too much shit to do.
Because yeah, like it just picks up where the original left off. It's
so good.
It's like it's equal parts like, oh, here's like space battles and tactics and really smart tacticians fighting each other, and then it's also like political thriller, and it's philosophical. It talks about like not just it's not just a political thriller in the sense that like Game of Thrones is, which is like, oh, who's going to become the leader? Let's fight each other and murder and whatnot. But it also talks about like political philosophy. It's like, is it okay to sacrifice this group if it ends up saving like the rest of the universe? Like, you know, do the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few? Are you justified in doing something terrible in order to get a position where you can then impact real change on everything? Like, there's so much of that going on. And as a political scientist, like I am, I guess I have to call myself that because I do have my BA in poli-sci, so I am a political scientist. It definitely scratches that itch a lot, but I also really appreciate the fact that it has something for everybody. If you're just in it for like space battles and tactics and stuff like that, it definitely has those elements to it as well. It does have like these two brilliant tacticians facing off against one another, but then it also dives into not just you know, them fighting for their sides, but they're critical of each other's sides. They're critical of each other, but then also like they're brilliant, and I appreciate that. Brilliant. And then yeah, it's like, you know, I think that they would do this. I think their government is going to do this in reaction to this news, and so we need to counter with doing this. It's sort of like watching like a chess match, but with thousands of pieces on the board, and the board is the entire damn universe. I'm like, yes! Oh my god, yes!
And then there's the part of me that likes where it's like, yeah, I fucking love, like, war. I love seeing the history. I know what they're gonna do. I know, like, kind of tactician moves and things like that. The formations they would likely do. That's exciting. The part I also really like is, like, when something like this happens, and I've said before where I have an interest in the Second World War, where, like, this, where it's, like, not just war happening, but other people stepping up and being like, this is our time to do something. Where it's, like, you have arms dealers, you have other people trying to push for things, you have different people, like, corrupting the government, and it's, like, other things at play that aren't just war. It's everyone else being shady as fuck.
Yep.
And that's, like, the thing I like
war
about war.
is also a business,
Yeah.
and business is
Shouldn't
good.
say like, what I find interesting about war is that it's not just two sides. It's never, almost ever two sides. It's many sides doing their own thing.
Yeah, because we see there are those who have a financial interest in keeping the war going as long as they can because they're selling to both sides. There are ones who are like...
dealing with food shortages, and they're like, well, we can play up that easily. Where it's like, well, now it's going to be a fucking buttload of money.
Like, it is... And I will freely admit, it's not going to be for everybody.
No.
It does... It has a bit of a slower pace because you do have to kind of understand what's happening to know, like, all of these amazing things that are going on. So it's not going to be for everybody. There will be some times where the CG isn't great. Most of it's pretty good. Of the CG use is usually in space, so you don't notice it as much. Plus, I've always said, if you're trying to show off, like, a futuristic, you know, spaceship or something, CGing kind of that is okay.
Yeah, even in the original, you see, like, hundreds of ships firing at the same time. It's like, that's kind of hard. That's a lot of work.
We can just... these are all the same ship model. We can just copy-paste. Like,
yeah, basically. And then just have them firing at different times.
Have them firing and whatnot. But, I mean, at the end of the day, if what you have heard us discuss is something that kind of piques your interest, just go for it. The entire first season is available. It is dubbed as well as subbed. We watched the sub. And I would say if you're not really, like, into it by maybe the first 6 episodes, it's probably not for you.
I would even say in the first 3, as per our usual rule.
Yeah. But, yeah, the movie just kind of... whatever you want to call it.
It's a movie. They called it a movie. It is what it is.
Yeah, but I mean, the way it's being released, the way that we're watching it is just like...
It's a movie.
It's like what Digimon Tri did, which is, you know, this is our movie. It's split into 4 episodes. Which,
well, I think it's just with their schedule and the other things they're doing, they can't commit to it week in and week out. Where they're like, okay, we have time to do it. Let's put it out here and here and here and here. But
I mean, so yes, like in our discussion of, you know, the best anime series of the year, this doesn't get included because it's technically films. I fought Sugar on that one, but she's like, if that's how they want to release it, that's how we have to view it.
I'm very strict on that.
So, but I mean, hey, it is a stacked year. I don't know. Part of me thinks that it would make the top 10, but I don't know for sure because,
that's a discussion for another time. And something we'll be doing again this year is our top 10 anime for the year. So you'll have to stay seated and
probably
watch.
Like 6 honorable mentions because it's good. This season has been very good. It's been a strong year, though.
Well, as you're saying, it's stacked, and we aren't even done yet. So let's move on. Next is Season 4 of My Hero Academia. It's been good. It's exactly what I expected. Animation's what I expected. The pace is what I expected. Everything's what I expected, and I'm so happy because I know where it's going. Some of you might not. Let me tell you, it's going to be good. It's going to be emotional.
The only negative that Sugar has said at all, because we watched the dub, she isn't the biggest fan of Overhaul's English voice. Yeah. I think it's fine. I kind of like it.
In my mind, it's not the voice that I had envisioned when I was reading it. So I was kind of taken aback by it. It's not bad. It's just not what I wanted.
I don't know. It gives me that Plague Doctor feel, which he's got that face.
Well, all of them have the plague mask.
Yeah. So I mean, it gives me that sort of vibe. So I'm okay with it. Yeah. I mean, overall, we've only really had one episode of new quote-unquote content for those who don't know what's coming up.
Yeah.
Because the first episode was a very inventive way of doing a recap.
I like them doing that rather than it just being a straight-up recap because everyone's like, oh, fuck, skip. Whereas this one, it kind of has some newer content, but is retelling the key points of what happened.
Yeah.
And it was enjoyable. So I like the introduction of the new character. For those of you who are wondering, no, he wasn't in the manga. He was a unique character, though. I like his quirk. It's very interesting. And I like his kind of story and where it ended up, rather than him not being, can I say, he was not a scumbag.
Yes.
So that was nice.
I mean, at this point, you have an expectation of what My Hero Academia is going to be. They had an extra 3 months to work on this season because they pushed it back.
Which is good.
Yeah.
I would rather
that's fine.
Anime take the time they need rather than rushing it out and then everyone being like, for years to come, being like, oh, that was crap. Or, oh, they fucked that up.
I mean, like, lots of people would say, like, there are elements in Black Clover that look like they were pushed out way too fast.
Oh, God, Black Clover. Just
Dragon Ball Super, like, God, it didn't get, the animation didn't get good until, like, the very end.
Even then,
and so
there were some shots that were
and
like,
this is the problem that happens when you just are pushing anime too fast. If you
that's the thing that's like just slightly off track here. I like watching the story of Black Clover, but watching the animation, I'm like, who?
It's so funny because like I believe it's the same two teams that are working on Black Clover.
Funny because it's like the people from Naruto are just like, just tell us when you're doing fighting scenes and we'll come over, and then the beaching can go back to it. I'm like, no!
It's like Boruto and Black Clover, they like switch. It's like every 3 months they're like, okay, now it's switched.
But yet somehow Boruto keeps that quality. Black Clover just goes to shit.
Yeah.
There's so many, like, I could pull tons of stills, like not even ones in motion where it's like, holy shit. That's bad. But anyways, to get back on track, My Hero Academia has been really good for what we've seen. I'm assuming it'll continue to be really good because Horikoshi is that kind of person where he puts out really good quality and he cares a lot about his product. So I can't see it being bad. Excuse me. And this arc is really good. I really enjoyed it. A lot of big things happen, which I'm excited for you to see.
And being able to see more of Mirio, getting able to see
we get to see more of Mirio, we get to see Sir Night-Eye, we get to see more of Kirishima, we get to see obviously the big three in action, we get to see some really cool things.
And as is the case,
as is tradition
with it, a couple of other students get the chance to kind of showcase their abilities a little bit more, which he's always very good with. One of the core complaints that I ended up having with Naruto is if you didn't have eye powers, by the end of it, you were useless. And here he's definitely, and even with Naruto, it got to a point, even towards the end of before the time skip, where certain people were just left behind in the dust. And I was like, we've got a classroom full of people. Like, let's utilize them.
They're garbage now.
Yeah,
they're just fodder.
Whereas so far with MHA, it's like they've learnt from the mistake, what I think is a mistake in Naruto, and are not doing that.
Yeah.
So I mean, we've got our main kind of like 4 or 5 who are generally considered, at least quirk-wise, to be more powerful than the others. But then lots of them are like, well, like, this is the kind of hero that I want to be, and they showcase their abilities in a lot better ways. So it's very good, and this is going to... The only thing that might keep it away from being like number 1 or number 2 on our list is the fact that we only get half the season before the end of it. So
we'll have to see. Oh, as a bridesmaid, never a bride. We'll have to see what happens. We'll have a long chat about it, trust me. We always do. But I feel like that's all that needs to be said. It's great. It will be great. It'll be a good time. Let's move on. Next one is New Cooking Master Boy. The title just always makes me pause when I say it, because it always seems
New
so...
Cooking Master Boy!
It seems so odd.
Are we in the 80s again for anime?
The style is very 80s, actually.
Yeah, it's weird.
Oddly enough. But it's how I can say it, it's very much a show about... Let's give you kind of the premise or synopsis here. We have a young boy who is very talented at cooking, who is labeled as the master. Obviously in the world they've had recognition, and it's going through kind of situational stories each episode so far, of him running into people who also have a passion for cooking or a passion for something, and him bringing out the best of cooking for them. I'd say it's very much like Food Wars without the ecstasy and
Yes.
There's no, like, fan service. There's no, like, ripping off clothes. Like, I've said before, it's one of the things I hate most about Food Wars, because it takes away from any of the substance that I saw there. But that's just me personally. I'm not saying it's bad. I've repeated myself so many times. It's just not for me.
Yeah.
Whereas New Cooking Master Boy is very much something that I can get on board with, because it is, obviously there are moments that are incredibly unrealistic, because it has like people doing techniques with cooking that are just impossible. I wouldn't say impossible, but
they're impossible.
I was about to say, I wouldn't say it was, yeah, it's pretty much impossible.
It's sort of like, I find it interesting that you're okay with this, but then I guess we'll have to see how far it goes, because for something like Inazuma 11, you hate that because it takes... That's the one with the soccer team, and their abilities are like
because here we go,
super flashy.
I hate shit like that because it takes away from what it is. Like, if that makes any sense. Whereas, like, okay, this show is about somebody who has an intense passion for cooking. Sorry, hiccuped. Has an intense passion for cooking, and does some like fancy like things with like hand movements or whatever, and does things that are totally.
I was thinking more the bow staff guy.
The bow staff guy, I can see a douchebag doing that, though. It's not totally out of left field or unreasonable to be like, oh, I can see a guy doing that. But, like, obviously some of the cooking techniques are, like, obviously unbelievable because they are. They just are impossible to do because you can't get that kind of form or whatever into that. But it's still the passion behind it of somebody being really passionate about food to the point where they're being creative in their way of thinking and producing food. Whereas if you get shit like soccer, yeah, I'm very passionate about certain things. And soccer is one of them. I used to be a soccer player. I'm sure you've all heard this story before. And for stuff like, I feel like soccer, if you dig down, it's about you persevering and trying really hard at something, and you can feel that in people who play it just by watching TV, whatever, you name it. But seeing like it seem like there's like powers in doing soccer and having like this magical ability where it's like I can't even tell you a move, but like, oh, Starfire kick, and it just like burns a hole in the net, and I'm like, I don't know, no, this isn't anything that I enjoy anymore. This is something stupid. Like,
see, and that's where I feel like
that's where the line is drawn for me.
This is maybe where I think the cooking show's gonna go.
Whereas this, no, I feel like.
Literally, they're going to have to face a dark cooking society. Like,
yeah, how do you... but I mean, like, that's kind of like the joke of it, where like they have to raise the stakes somehow, but like have it situated, and like some of the stuff they talk about is real. But obviously, they take it to the next level and be like, oh, it's mythical and all this stuff. Of course, it's not. But it gives you an idea of like the concepts that they're covering or talking about are real things. It's just they're making them very Yu-Gi-Oh! In the sense of like, oh, fuck yeah, the stakes are so fucking high. Of course they're not. It's like, cooking, for fuck's sakes. You're not on MasterChef.
I'm totally, like, this is a swimming in sevens for me.
That's the shonen part of this anime where it's just like, let's take it to fucking 11. It's just like,
oh yeah.
But it's not like to like fucking 15 like Food Wars where it's like, oh, it'll make you fuck. I can't say what I'm about to say. I can swear, but I can't say the part I was about to say.
It makes you feel so much ecstasy that your clothes rip off your body.
Yeah. I was going to say something else, but yeah. To me, that's just, it takes away and it becomes It's no longer about passion. It's about showcasing something that's stupid. Like, I know some people like Food Wars, and it's nothing saying you can't like it. But for me, when it's like, oh, you eat food that's so good it blows your clothes off, it's just like, now it's just become about, like, fan service. And it isn't about literally having passion for cooking, about someone's perseverance, and about their struggle for cooking. Like, we got that in the first few episodes of this show, that he's really invested in this, and he's tried really hard, and he's worked diligently to do this. Where it's not like, it's just different for me. Yeah. I'm not saying it's perfect.
No.
I'm not saying that.
The anime for me...
it's to a point where it goes on that fine line where I find it enjoyable. Where it's like, comically silly, but serious. It's weird. It's a line that I'm very much on.
Like, for me, this is a swimming in sevens. I appreciate it. I think it's funny. I think it is going to go into this thing where it's like, people are going to have, like, weird, forbidden techniques to cook things and whatnot.
We'll see.
You know,
I'm not selling this as the next Jesus. I'm saying it's better than Food Wars for me because it doesn't have tons of sex in it.
And just to preface this by going with another cooking show that we both really like, it doesn't do the same thing that, like, Restaurant to Another World did.
Yeah,
which
that's
is,
totally
like,
chill.
Restaurant to Another World made me hate myself that I could not try to eat this food. I want this to exist. This is more like, oh, let's go on an adventure that has to do with cooking. I'm like, okay, that's fine by me. I do think it's going to go into, like, having weird forbidden techniques to cook things. And
I don't know if it'll be, like, forbidden stuff, though. I think it'll be like, oh, you have to cook this dish to save your family or something. Like, I think it'll be that kind of stakes, like shonen stakes. But it's not like...
it's going to be... You know, oh, you have to make
Shadow Realm.
You have to make a pizza, and the way this guy makes a pizza is by bashing it with nunchucks to, like, beat the dough and stuff like that.
I'd believe that happening.
Yeah, because I mean, we already saw something
kind of similar.
Yeah, like and so I mean, it's going to be silly. It's not going to take itself too seriously. It's going to dip into shonen conventions now and then.
It's very 80s. It's very
the look of it is very 80s. It takes itself
very lightly in the sense, like, I could have seen a show when I was a kid watching this where it's like, yeah, it's about cooking, but it's also like fucking high stakes, like manufactured high stakes, where it's like, oh, my dog will die if I don't do this perfect chicken.
Yu-Gi-Oh! Did that very well too. At the end of the day, it is playing a children's card game to save the world.
And that's exactly where it's like, I feel like this will be like Yu-Gi-Oh! In the sense where it's like, it's just cooking,
and
but it's about, like, fucking high stakes.
As a guilty pleasure, I do love Yu-Gi-Oh! So
yeah, I know you do. So I was like, why are you breaking on it?
I'm not trying to rag on it. I'm just like, I think this is where it's going to go, and you're either going to be okay with that or you're not.
I think I'm okay with it. It's just the fact that it's like, I don't like seeing tons of tits and ass and everything that doesn't need it. Food Wars never needed TNA. It could have just been what it was without the TNA, and it would have done so much better in my opinion. But I know some people were like, what the fuck are you talking about? But I was like, whoa.
Whoa.
Chillax. It's just a theory. An anime theory. No, I'm not stepping on Matt Pat's land. But anyways, that's what we think about it. Kind of a 80s-esque shonen high-stakes Yu-Gi-Oh!
That has to do with cooking.
Correct. Let's move on. Next up is Radiant. It is oh no, it's not continuing. It is the next season, but it's not continuing. Returning. It's been good as far as I can say. Animation's been consistent with what it was last season. We've got some new interesting stories, especially with Dart. I don't know what else to say because it's been pretty good over the few episodes we've had.
Yeah, I appreciate it a lot.
Character, the cute design, and she's cute, and her animal's cute.
It's you know what? I'll totally spoil that. It's a raccoon dragon.
It's a raccoon dragon.
Dragoon? Is that what it was called? Dragoon?
I call him Legend of Dragoon.
Nice.
I love that.
It's a very good mix of knowing kind of when to be like
serious and funny.
Yeah, I was very critical of it when it started because I wanted it to kind of get to the point where it is now, which is like let's talk about let's talk about the inherent social issues that exist in this because like anybody who has grown up as a kid in the 90s saw the X-Men animated series and like you can do racism, you can do, you know, social injustice in an animated world that's all about combat and stuff, and make it something that is worthwhile, make that add to the story. And I felt like they were pulling their punches a bit at the start, but then everything kind of got a little bit more serious. I can understand why this... how to phrase it? I phrased it in a way that you didn't appreciate, because because you love fairy tale. I was like, this is going to be this generation's of shonen fairy tale.
I remember sitting on the couch and he's like, "Is this going to be the next fairy tale?" And the look on my face totally dissolved.
Not in the sense of, like, fairy tale, for the most part, usually is very kind of bright. It's very kind of like, it doesn't take itself too seriously, whereas Radiant definitely has its dour moments. It has its moments where it's very serious and kind of sad. I meant more in the sense of, I don't feel like it will ever get the same recognition as the big shonen do. I feel like a lot of people will not really pay it much attention because it isn't One Piece, and it isn't Full Metal Alchemist, and it isn't Dr. Stone, it isn't The Promised Neverland, it isn't MHA, but it carves out a niche all its own. I like the story that they're telling. I think Seth as a character is actually far deeper than a lot of other main protagonists that we get. I think that he's a far more complex and interesting character than somebody like Naruto or Boruto. You know, I think that he lives in a world that has a lot more to say, and I think that a lot of people are kind of sleeping on it. I think that Radiant deserves a little bit more attention than it gets.
I feel like it needs a little more time for more people to get invested, and I feel like part of its downfall is like what Boruto and Black Clover are doing. They're continuing, you know, when it's taking breaks as it is, which, I mean, if it needs time to do it, fine. But I feel like when it starts doing that, people kind of like what we saw with Attack on Titan, kind of petering in and out, kind of unsure. Like, obviously Attack on Titan had way more bright reception than Radiant did, but I just mean in that sense, when you have periods in between, people are kind of wishy-washy of, well, did they like the first season? Was it enough to come back for the second? And all that stuff, where it's just like, right now, I feel like if it could get a bigger base if it kept continuing like Black Clover, like Boruto, like Naruto did. I feel like that would give it more grounding, but we will see. It's hard to say where it'll go just because I haven't read the manga. I've done some reading ahead, reading some different articles and stuff, but I haven't read the manga. But it's been good so far. I've enjoyed it. Where it's going to go, it's kind of hinted at, which I like. Yeah.
Like, nobody really talks about it.
No.
And that's a shame, because I feel like it's definitely...
And it's so funny, because Jeff was the naysayer in the beginning, but now he's on board. And I feel like a lot of people would be that way if they continued with it. Because even at the end of the first season, we have, it won't be a spoiler, a death. And it was a meaningful death, and it was, like, very heartbreaking. And I was just like, ugh, and nobody talked about it. And I was just like, why is nobody watching this?
I mean, it must have done well enough. Like, it has a second season, so it must have done something to warrant, you know, having a second season, because...
I found, like, nobody was talking about it. Like, there was the odd person on Reddit being like, oh, episode blah, 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 blah. But it wasn't anybody like, oh, that was so good. It was so good, because their, like, whole presence in the story was meaningful, and what they stood for was meaningful, and it was like, ugh.
Yep. It's... I think if you like traditional shonen type anime and you haven't tried Radiant yet, I would say give it a shot. See if it, you know, kind of speaks to you. Yeah, I love the character models. I think are really exceptional.
So cute.
Yeah, they are that perfect mix of, like...
All the girls are done in such a cute way. I can verify that. The guys...
Melly is one of my favorite female characters in an anime for the past, like, you know, 2 or 3 years.
Melly's cute.
I think that...
I like Dart. I like his design. He's a male character, and I like his whole look.
I like the fact that our primary antagonists are not, like, just evil for evil's sake.
Yeah.
You know, they have a different view of the world from, you know, whatever basis that comes from, and that puts them, you know, against Seth. But, again, nobody seems to be talking about it one way or another. Like, it's almost... In a way, it's almost better to, like, be really bad at the start and then improve. Like,
are you talking about Black Clover?
Black Clover got just dunked on. It got dunked on as it should have been.
Yeah.
But then it, like, you know, eventually
the animation never got better.
And then, you know, it kind of found its footing, and now it's doing well enough that it kind of continues going on, and lots of people talk about certain fight sequences and whatnot.
That's when the old team comes back and they're like, fuck yeah.
Whereas with Radiant, with it just being a constant, like, 7.5, like, it just seems like...
Everyone's like, oh, good for it. And I'm like, well, let him watch.
And that's what I feel happened to Fairy Tail, too. I don't get me wrong, Fairy Tail has a fairly loyal fan base. Yeah. But at the end of the day, so many people are like, oh, good for it.
Yeah.
When you tell people, like, oh, it's had like 350 episodes, they're like, oh,
so what?
Good for it.
Yeah. I was going to make a video, but someone made one kind of similar to what I was going to do, so I didn't make it. We'll have a podcast likely talking about our feelings about it, just to kind of get it out there. Because,
the final episode for us, for the English dub, is like 2 days away. Yeah. So. Not to date our podcast too much. Oh, goodness.
Oh, my gosh. Even if I put a date on it, I wouldn't care if people knew. Takes time to record everything and then edit it and put it together. And then hopefully YouTube lets me load it. And if not, I have to restart. Put it together,
and what have you got? An episode of our podcast. Well, there's too many syllables there.
Well, you taped yourself into that corner.
I know.
Let's move on. 7 Deadly Sins, Wrath of the Gods. It's been okay. Nothing that I can say was bad about it so far. Just kind of picking up where we left off. It just is what it is. I don't know what to say.
I had like a mind blow moment a couple of days ago when I was thinking about 7 Deadly Sins. It is totally beyond the fact that it doesn't have like the same popularity, because it can't. It's for shonen, I feel it's this generation's Dragon Ball Z.
Kinda.
You've got a story that honestly so far isn't great. It feels very secondary to, let's create a bunch of heroes that you want to root for that have different techniques and they're different people. A bunch of cool villains to fight. Yeah. And have them just bash the crap out of each other.
Because anything with Escanor, I'm like, fuck.
Yeah. And like, obviously, like, that worked for Dragon Ball Z, and then it worked for Dragon Ball Super, which is like, let's just have cool heroes that everybody wants to root for that have different techniques. Yeah. Fight cool villains.
Evil,
And it's like, let's not have the story get too much in the way. Let's not have it be like... 7 Deadly Sins has some melodramatic moments, but they're always very character-based. They're not world-based. They're not narratively focused. I feel like, in particular, like, Bon, he has some heartbreaking moments.
Oh, God, it broke my heart.
Yeah, but they're all very character-based.
Elaine.
And we already have a character who feels like they're getting Yamcha'd. Because, like, I'll just say it. Oh, she has memory loss. Oh, now she doesn't. Oh, yep, she does again. And now she's not even around right now.
Well, she's with King right now.
Yeah, and I mean, King is a pretty cool character, but now he's just...
referring to Diane, and I feel like...
King is like Tien. He's also around with this loser.
I've never heard you say that. That was funny.
Yeah, he's around with this loser, and it's like... It feels very Dragon Ball Z to me. And both Sugar and I teach, and lots of kids really, really like 7 Deadly Sins. It's on Netflix. It's an easier sort of thing to get into. It's an easier thing to watch. And that's where I felt especially Dragon Ball Z and then Super really hit that nice mesh of just like, screw the story. Screw like having a really deep narrative. Let's just create scenarios where cool heroes and cool villains fight each other, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
You know, I think we've already had 2 tournament arcs in 7 Deadly Sins, if I'm not mistaken.
We had one that was not exactly, but pretty close to Dragon Ball.
Yep.
And then this next one we had was similar, but different on the cliffs.
Yep. And so, you know, and I read like the last 10 chapters or so, like I know how everything kind of comes about and ends. And yes, it does escalate, and it gets to a point where, you know, you might care about the story, but you care more about the characters than you ever will the narrative. And I mean, that's fine. It does cool battle sequences. It's got cool characters with really, really neat abilities. And you just kind of want to see them all crash into each other.
So needless to say, it's kind of the same old, good guys fighting bad guys in our kingdom, and obviously the resolution to that coming up. So let's move on. Next up is Special Crime Investigation Unit Special 7. It was so fucking bad, it makes me angry. In the first 5 minutes, honest to God, I was like to Jeff, I was like, this will be shit. He's like, how can you tell? And I was like, and I riddled off a couple things. I was like, I really need to make a video because holy crap, it did so many things wrong. Where I was just like, and then as it went on, I was like, I'll give it a chance. And I was like, okay, that's promising, that's promising. And then it was just like, full fuck you. And I was like, whoa.
Like, the initial...
And then it stole ideas from other stuff that were more successful.
Oh, character models are stolen from other anime. As we watched, it was like, oh wow, his face looks a lot like...
That's taken from there. That's taken from Fairy Tail. That's taken from Cowboy Bebop. That's taken from... I was like, whoa. It's like, it stole so many things. And then it's like, goes against the laws of physics. And it's like, what the fuck is happening?
Okay. So, I even prepared. I prepared a statement about this.
I didn't know, so I'm interested. Go ahead.
The first episode was just not impressive at all. You have this weird juxtaposition between what feels like they want to do a gritty police procedural mixed with characters that are superhuman in a world where humans live with beings like elves, dwarves, and giants. Mm-hmm. All of that is thrown in the very first episode, by the way, and it's just thrown away. Like, it's like, oh yeah, there are also elves and dwarves and stuff like that. I was like, okay, like, what does that mean for the world? Oh, we live all peacefully now. Okay, so then what... I don't understand why it's there. Yeah, it didn't work for me at all. It annoys me when in one shot they try to make it gritty and realistic, and then later in the episode you have a character who can, after a machine gun is shot at somebody, jump in the way of the bullets and slice them all in half with a sword. This is after the gun has already been shot.
Yeah, they jump in front.
If you want to have that kind of a world, sure. But then make the narrative and the storytelling reflect that is an ability that exists in this world. This is how I ended my thought. It feels like it was written by a 12-year-old who was like, oh man, and then this would happen because that would be cool.
Yeah. Oh man, I love Dragon Ball.
The whole first episode felt like a 12-year-old who was like, oh, remember this character? Wouldn't it be cool if I put them in this scenario? Wouldn't it be cool if this happened and then this happened? And it's like...
Remember her from Fairy Tail? What if she had, like, way cooler powers? It's like, what?
And the whole time you're just telling them... And again, as teachers, we're like... Okay, but you need to like make the narrative and the plot work together. You need to focus everything. No, and then this will happen here, and that will be super cool.
And this person will jump in, and it'll totally make sense. But why will it make sense?
Because
we haven't met
cool.
them before. Yeah, it's just like we haven't been introduced to them. No. Trust me, it's cool.
The very very basic plot point that they started off with at first. I was actually kind of into. I was like, oh, okay, it's this kid who was saved.
And I was like, okay, as we literally paused the episode, I was like, this is how they can save the episode. And I said to Jeff exactly what should have happened. And they went the exact opposite direction. I was just like, it's like being like passed in the middle of the road. I'm like, come back! You're going the wrong way!
It was...
I was like, that's how that would be so interesting. And they just totally kept running. I was like, stop.
And I mean, to be fair,
He's already dead.
It's not to the levels of... Oh man, what was the one with the books?
The books? You mean the one with the dragons?
No, the girls who are reflections of fictional characters.
Oh god, that's
That it isn't like that level of just absolute abomination. This is
liked it? What was it called? Oh, it's something that kind of rhymed. It was like March and Magic. Yeah. It just has alliteration.
I watched it because I wanted to see the dumpster fire burn. But like, it's not to that level. So it's not like it's the worst thing ever. It's just...
You know what's bad when I'm watching something and my eyes narrow in disgust.
It was just... It does not feel like it has a focus. It feels like it is mostly about like I said, it's like somebody who's like, wouldn't it be cool if blank happened? And then you're just like,
but well, I mean, that doesn't make any... Saying, but why? And then they just keep talking.
That doesn't make much sense for this world. And then this could happen. but you didn't really preface that by saying, and then this will happen. You're like, I mean, that doesn't make any sense.
And then it's like moments where I'm like, why is her character design so much better than his? Like, it's so...
Yeah, and they like, definitely...
Wow, she's super cute and well, like, designed, and I look over and I'm like, whoa, fuck.
And definitely it wore its character model inspirations on its sleeve. It was really... almost insultingly how close it looks to other characters from other anime. Because, like, immediately Sugar and I were like, well, that's from this. And we both named the exact same thing. So it's like,
I remember he was just like, let's play a game. He's like, what does that remind you of? I was like, Jet.
Who does that remind you of? Jet. Who does that remind you of?
Kagura.
From Fairy Tail. It's like, ooh.
It's like, we both think the same things. It's pretty bad.
Yeah, and we named the exact same characters. Yeah. It's like, and the premise and the story and the plot and the narrative do not save anything. The only thing I can maybe give it a tiny bit of credit for...
I'd love to hear it.
I kind of like the more broad strokes they used in some of the animation. Like, I liked kind of the thicker lines that they use.
That's a shallow compliment.
Oh, yeah, I know. It popped out at me when I first saw it. And, like,
I thought, get what you mean.
Yeah, and the first shot of the anime I thought was actually done pretty well. Like, the first sequence. I was like, this looks okay.
It just reminds me of that meme where everything's on fire. It's like, it's fine.
Yeah. But beyond that, yeah, it is not good. And it's not even like a funny not good.
It's a bad not good.
March and Madgen, I had fun laughing at it.
Oh, some of the animation in that was enough to laugh. That was so fucked up.
Like, if you're going to be bad, be catastrophically bad, and then you'll get at least an audience.
Where, like, every episode has at least 3 gifs.
Yeah, and then you're just like, this is just like, oh. It isn't like an, oh my god, I can't believe it was that bad. Lol, this is an, ugh.
Let's move on. That was sad. So the next one is Stars Align. It's about soft tennis, which I didn't realize was a thing, quite honestly. We were both saying, like, what's soft tennis? Is it tennis? It's not.
I mean, it is tennis, just with a different style of ball. So, like, it's tennis, but it's not tennis, but it is.
So, it's from the same creator. The reason we were kind of interested in it, and I'm not so much a sports person, as you know. It has to be something special about it for me to be interested. This was done by the same creator who did Visions of Escaflowne, correct?
Yes, which... That was one of those anime that, and I feel like a lot of people, a lot of people, like, that was their first sort of foray into something that was a little more mature.
I remember when I was younger, it wasn't like my first one, but it was just like so interesting.
Yeah.
And all the characters, I was like, oh my god, so androgynous, so beautiful, so like, I was like, fuck.
And I mean, the version for those who, for listeners or watchers who are not North America, the version that we got, Fox butchered the hell out of it.
It was so out of sequence and cuts and...
I think it had... Its original run is 26 episodes. I think it aired 23. So it cut something 3 entire episodes worth of content.
And it was confusing as all hell.
Yeah, it was very weird.
I got to see it in order.
But like, on the whole, it was very imaginative. It was a different style of kind of mecha anime where the mecha wasn't at the forefront. And so I'm always kind of interested when somebody like that comes around, even if it is an odd sort of slice of life sports anime. Yeah. And so far, I've enjoyed it.
Yeah. Like, give you a quick synopsis. God, I can't stop hiccuping. No part of the synopsis. We have this kind of club that's in school that does soft tennis. And they find out that through a new kind of leader in the school that they are doing funding for groups for those who kind of show effort and are winning awards and things like that. So since these boys that are doing soft tennis aren't great and haven't really won very many awards, their club is at risk of being disbanded. And somebody from kind of our protagonist's past comes along and kind of gives hope to the club. And that's kind of the show. The animation's been good. The voices have been good. I kind of have a feeling where it'll go. A lot of kind of...
It went real dark at the end.
Yeah. It had quite a few parallels. I feel like they're trying to be certain things like Your Lie in April. Yeah. Especially with the parental kind of aspect. Let's just say that. So that's interesting. Nothing stands out right now where this will be amazing. But I feel like it, so far, hasn't done anything to make me not like it.
Yeah, and I think with how it ended, you can definitely, like, I had, as the episode kind of ran, I had a lot of questions about our protagonist and the way that he would respond to things.
Right.
And I was like, that doesn't make a lot of sense. You seem, you know, in a lot of ways you seem very, you know, like this and that, and and you're reacting in a very different sort of way. And it's immediately answered with how the episode ends.
Right.
And yeah, it will go to some dark places. Obviously, it's going to show, like you said, with, you know, the parallels to something like Your Lie in April, where, you know, he's going to use soft tennis as a way to kind of overcome
Escape
some other issues going on with his life.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is enjoyable. I like tennis as a whole. I haven't watched The Prince of Tennis.
My friend really loves it.
Yeah, our friend really
it.
likes it. I like tennis as a sport. I've played it before. I've never played it like seriously or anything, just for fun.
I am terrible. I can say that very openly.
And I like the idea of, like, the tennis aspect is kind of secondary. It seems like it's going to be a little bit more dramatic about their lives and how soft tennis kind of folds into them.
Right.
Yeah, I've liked all the characters so far. They've all been likable in their own way.
Right.
Even if they are... Damaged is a strong word, but they're definitely...
I'd say damaged.
Damaged, yeah, they are... there's some heavy stuff going on with some of their lives and kind of how they view
and by
things.
Jeff's insinuating by heavy, it's like stuff about parents that's not pleasant for
parents
some people.
or parental type people and whatnot. Like I think some people it will be kind of difficult to see these characters. It'll be different forms of abuse.
Let's put it that way.
It's going to be difficult for some people to watch. Yeah, these young kids who they're just trying to they're trying to be kids, and this maybe is something that reflects more upon, again, with Sugar and I being teachers, and we see the results of this sort of thing a lot.
Well, I was about to say something, but I'll keep it to myself.
Where we kind of see what happens to these kids, and we have to, and another job that I have deals primarily with youth who have been abused, and just kind of it can be a little difficult, and they're damaged, and it can be difficult to, for entertainment's sake, watch that sort of thing also happening, but also that is also an avenue then to do different types of storytelling. So I trust in the creator to know what they're doing and know how to tell an intriguing story, even based on, some sad stuff. A lot of sad, weird crap happens in Visions of Escaflowne, but it also tells a really unique story that you didn't really get anywhere else.
Right.
And so if this is the framework that he wants to use to, tell a story, I'm all on board. Go for it.
So you'll have to give it a try and see what you think, but we'll move on. And last but not least, we have Vinland Saga, which is continuing. I know I've been hard on it in the past, and people are very aware of that. I'd say the last few episodes have been more interesting, just because we kind of get more into Askalad's backstory a little bit, and realize his significance to the story. Otherwise, it's kind of maintaining its course and being what it is, somewhat historical, somewhat kind of fiction. And we have kind of our main characters still together, and... yeah.
I think it's been improving. I think, again, this has the same sort of flaw that Dr. Stone had, which is that people, when you are talking about this is like this generation's Berserk, I'm like...
I hate when people say that,
that is,
it's not even like it.
I mean, I get it in the sense of like the grand scale of the storytelling, and that it's going to presumably take place over the span of like many years, and it's going to be, and it is like very adult themes happening at times.
That's like even the last episode we had where it's like they had that whole scene. I was like, Berserk would have no problem showing that very graphically.
Yeah. And so I think
it was very covered up in a nice way, but I was like, that's not Berserk.
I think you took the wrong sort of message from people saying it's Berserk.
It's Berserk. It's like full gore, it's action, it's heavy, it's intense, it's dark,
I think when people say that it was like it's going to be this Berserk, it's more like this epic sort of story that pottakes place over potentially decades with some Berserk obviously doesn't have a whole lot of historical references that you can make, but it's being told like an epic. And I think that Vinland Saga can be seen that way.
Then that's not Berserk. You're just explaining something.
I think some people were saying it just as a reaction to the very first episode. They're like, wow.
Personally, I hate it when people say it's like Berserk, because to me, Berserk signifies different things, and it does not compare.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's fine.
In the ways that
it's not. Yeah, it's not Berserk, but I do think it is a very mature story that is like, it is about how terrible history is, but not just that, like how terrible history is to the unique and the outliers, how people can become damaged by, you know, like one bad day, one bad thing happening, you know.
Story of my life.
I like the peppering in of all the historical content and the fact that like all of this story takes place on a backdrop of what actually happened. Some of the characters are legitimately taken from history. They're dramatized, obviously, and they're made to be probably in positions that they weren't exactly, but that's the element of storytelling. I think I've really enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it when it's gone into sort of the political. I've enjoyed the fact that it is also very kind of harsh, very to the point sometimes. I like when it really, and it's starting to do that now, where it's really diving more into the depth of the characters. The story does the best when it's not even following Thorfinn. Like, when Thorfinn is just kind of, who is our main protagonist, the last few episodes he's very much been kind of pushed to the side a bit, which just goes to show you how much better a character some of the other ones are.
I would laugh so hard if like the series kept on and kept like scooting him over to the point where he just didn't show up anymore.
I guess I wouldn't be surprised.
I'd be so happy.
We have not read anything.
No.
I have had one thing spoiled for me.
The only thing I know is the historical parts, like the stuff that's actually true that they're covering.
So I've had one sort of thing spoiled for me, but it wouldn't surprise me if they do take more of like a Game of Thrones sort of style, where it's like, oh, we're going to follow this character for a while, and then we might jump to something else happening for a while, and we'll follow them. At the end of the day, I have enjoyed it. I feel like it has gotten some acclaim that it doesn't deserve, but that's not its fault. Like, to sit there and like bash on it because it's not as great as blank is like...
Well, no, it's always the audience's fault for hyping something up way too much. And that's not to say, like, I've hyped shit, well, as you see with My Hero Academia, I've hyped it all the way up. Whereas other people have done that about other things, especially Vinland Saga and Dr. Stone, where it's like, I don't feel that way.
But I mean, Vinland Saga, to me, thus far, is like an 8 to an 8.5. It is very good. I don't think that you can say it's not, like, good.
I would never say it's not good.
Yeah, like, I think that just Thorfinn as a character is kind of a lame duck character.
It just gets me mad when people are like, oh, this is the best fucking one of the year. And it's like, no.
No, it's not.
I can tell you why, but no.
And, I mean, is it going to be in the conversation in our top 10? Definitely. It has to be. Because it is very good. And I like what they've been doing with it. I like almost everything about it. I just don't like Thorfinn as a character, and it's difficult. It's difficult to go through a show, an anime, where the main character, like the lens in which you're supposed to be viewing this, is done from a lens that you don't really like. Mm-hmm. And so that takes it down a little bit for me.
That was kind of like when we ran into Thorkel, where he's just like, oh yeah, I know your dad. I was like, yeah, he knows your dad.
Yep.
This is like, kill him.
And that's the thing, is like all the tertiary characters or the secondary characters, even the prince has come out and become like a much more interesting character than Thorfinn is, because Thorfinn is, and I get it, like, it's not that I don't understand what they're trying to do with him, because times when he is alone on his own, not part of this crew, you do see kind of the depth of what he can be. Mm-hmm. He just isn't that right now, and that's kind of disappointing. But thankfully, we do have Canute, we've got Askeladd, we've got Torkel, like, we've got these characters who do have the depth necessary to kind of push you through parts where Thorfinn is kind of a lame duck.
This reminds me, like, Thorfinn, it reminds me of, like, The Simpsons when they have the sheep, and you're like, when you get moments of Askeladd, you're like, aw, and he walks in the way, get out of the way!
Yeah, get out of the way! 'Cause, yeah.
It's not about you anymore! Get out of the way!
Honestly, if we were to do, like, a top 10 characters of the year, Askeladd would be in that conversation.
For Crunchyroll, he'll be one of the antagonists. He has to be.
Because he is so good.
He's good.
And as the last couple of episodes have shown me, I'm like, I would enjoy this way more if it was Askeladd's story. Like I said, maybe that is what they kind of do, is they will start to anthologize it and be like, okay, this portion is going to be more about Prince Canute.
Like, I think I know basically what they'll do, just based on the historical stuff they've been implying and doing. So I think I know where it'll go, but I haven't told you the historical part, so you don't know where it goes. But who knows?
I mean, I know a lot of that history. We learned it because we're in Canada. We learned Canadian history.
I know the specific history you likely wouldn't know. I'll explain it to you after the podcast, but I don't think you know the gist of, like, locations and stuff, what's happening right now. Yeah. But, like, especially with, like, Torkel and, like, I don't want to say Hooksail spoil stuff.
That's right.
About that history. Anyways, and I always wonder if it's like, never mind. Anyways, so it'll be interesting to see if it goes more towards the historical side and kind of keep leaning that way, or if it's going to kind of do its own thing again.
The new opener is done by your guys.
Yeah.
Man of the Mission.
Yeah. Well, Man of the Mission's going to get some nice coverage again. I love Man of the Mission.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I think at the end of the day, while you're kind of harsh on Vinland Saga, I think that at the end it comes from a place where you're like, I can see it in my mind how good it could be, and it's just not there yet, and that's more annoying than, like...
It's also, well, the part that's annoying is, like, we talked about it a bit before, where it's annoying because everyone hyped it up to be this Jesus-level thing.
Yes.
It's annoying because I know the historical part, which I don't know if they'll be compliant with, or if they're just going to do their own thing. I hate Thorfinn, or Torfinn, however you want to say it, as a character, depending, I guess the dialect would be more Torfinn. I hate him as a character. I hate everything he stands for. I hate what they did with him, and I hate how he acts. It drives me
crazy.
Is,
I think you're supposed to.
I know, but it's stupid. Even if you're supposed to, they did it badly, in my opinion. Like, they're like, oh, they lit up this whole thing for his dad and what he symbolized and how heavily it was told of what he believed. And he's like, no, let's do the opposite. And I'm like... Feels like that moment in, like, Lion King where he sees him in the clouds. Instead he's like, fuck you. And then goes back to being a dick. Whereas this is like, well, that was a wasted moment. And it's like, it's kind of the same thing. That's how I feel. It's just like, or they could just do it all historical and make it fucking awesome, because history itself is awesome and people don't appreciate history. It's like, but we'll see. Again, not saying it's bad. Just rubs me the wrong way for certain things, and that's just me. And I will continue watching it, and it will be in the discussion for the year end, so don't worry.
It'll be interesting where it ranks, because...
There's things right now where top, like, 5 I can probably rattle off. The other 5, I don't know. I'd have to look at the list, and then that's when Jeff and I usually go into heavy debate mode and argue why or why not. And we're both, like, really into debating, so that way. Anywho... That's our wrap-up for Fall 2019. We had a bigger stack this season, more so than the last few. This year wrap-up will be interesting. Let's see if Crunchyroll shits the bed on their award show again. Lots of things to see after Christmas. And we'll kind of keep it posted. We'll let you know if anything else happens, any big news.
Like I said, expect another podcast
likely just
relatively
about Fairy
soon,
Tail.
because it'll be about Fairy Tail.
Yeah.
When an anime that has over 300 episodes ends, like, that's worthy of a discussion point on its own, as opposed to just being like, you know, we'll talk about it for 2 minutes here and be like, hey, it was good. Like, no, we'll discuss it a little bit more in depth, because this is. I don't want to be, like, too, overzealous or anything, but for some people, like, this was their anime, and it is done. Like, this is their epic.
I am legit heartbroken that it's ending, because there's characters I've heavily invested in. Like, I love Juvia. She's probably my favorite of the entire series. I am so invested in her. And like,
and then we can just, instead of, you know, thinking about the fact that we don't want a 4-hour podcast, we could just make that its own thing and talk about all the stuff we like and don't like, and the why didn't this do better, we feel it should have done better, why was it always considered a B tier, blah blah blah. We'll do all of that soon too.
Yeah, for sure. We'll get into all of it. So until next time, thank you for joining me. Thank you for joining me, Jeff.
Of course, always.
And as always, till next time, we'll see you later.